2026 must be a gold mine for neck doctors. Because, goodness, I feel like we are getting geopolitical whiplash every day. Only 24 hours ago, I was discussing the prospects for Project Freedom, the system that the United States wanted to establish to evacuate ships stranded inside of the Gulf. Then Marco Rubio auditioned for the 2028 Republican nominee / held a press conference, substituting for the regular press secretary Caroline Leavitt, who is out on maternity leave. Good for Rubio for stepping in and filling yet another job vacancy in the White House. Anyway, Rubio said, quote, "The operation is over. Epic Fury, the administration's name for the Iran war, is, the president notified Congress we're done with that stage of it, okay? We're now on to this Project Freedom. Except maybe not?" Later in the day, Trump announced on Truth Social that, quote, "Project Freedom will be paused for a short period of time to see whether an agreement can be finalized and signed with Iran." Then, just this morning, Axios published an article with the headline, "U.S. and Iran closing in on one-page memo to end the war, officials say." But then you read the article and find out that the one-page memo will not be ending the war. Cool. And just to be sure, Trump posted on Truth Social a couple of hours after that about how Hormuz will be open to all, including Iran, or the bombing restarts at a much higher level and intensity than it was before. Despite the objectively absurd world that we live in, I think there is some room for cautious optimism. Keyword cautious, and nothing like that headline suggests. So today, I want to explain why there is some real hope this time, cover what may be in that one-page memo to end the war, and close with some brief comments about whether any of this was worthwhile. But first, optimism. I know that this administration tends to say a lot of things. I am also somewhat pleased that there is a greater public recognition that we ought to tune out those messages. Simultaneously, however, there has been an overcorrection, where Trump announces things that are immediately discounted, even though they are uttered in conjunction with costly actions. Basically, we are ignoring the second half of the cliché, and we need to watch what is being done here. Yesterday, I noted the inherent flaws of Project Freedom. The United States would not be properly convoying ships out of the Gulf like from the Iran-Iraq War, but rather merely coordinating escapes. There was no way that Iran would go for it. Thus, it was best described as an improvement over the baseline, but it was no true solution to restoring shipping in the Gulf to pre-war levels. True to that, 2 ships made it through under the program. Not bad given the short time frame that the program lasted. 2 is indeed better than 0, but still a fraction of what it should be. Behind some of the media bravado, the Trump administration recognizes the limited and risky nature of the system, while still correctly noting that it was doing something. This is important because it means that pausing the program conveys real information. We are going from a trickle of ships exiting the Gulf to no ships exiting the Gulf, at least for the short run. The reason that you would do this is because you think that there is a good chance that a better solution will soon be forthcoming. Namely, that Iran will relax restrictions on transits through Hormuz, and everyone's safety will be guaranteed. Consequently, despite how easy it is to dismiss a Truth Social post as irrelevant, I think there is reason for cautious optimism here. However, I would simultaneously note that if there were, say, a 20% chance of a deal getting done in the next couple of days, it would be worth briefly halting a risky evacuation strategy. Put differently, we can simultaneously think that progress is unlikely overall, while interpreting the pause in Project Freedom as good news. That takes us to the meat of today's adventure, the contents of the one-page memo that will allegedly end the war. Well, no, let's actually read the contents of the article. Quote, "Many of the terms laid out in the memo would be contingent on a final agreement being reached, leaving the possibility of renewed war or an extended limbo in which the hot war has stopped, but nothing is truly resolved." Now, let me preface what I'm about to say with how, in international relations, nothing is truly final. There are no externally enforceable contracts. If, at any point, someone decides that the current system is just not working for them, they can start, or restart, a war. But there is a significant difference between a one-page memo that will end a war and a one-page memo that will guide future negotiations between the parties. Again, I would describe this as a cause for optimism, that the ceasefire may be extended, and that there will eventually be some type of self-enforcing settlement put into place. That said, I know better than to put the cart before the horse, count my chickens before they hatch, or any other animal-related idiom. But let's examine what is inside this alleged war-ending memo. There will be a 30-day period in which the Strait of Hormuz is gradually reopened to all traffic, thereby ending both halves of the blockade. Iran will remove its highly enriched uranium from the country. A 12 to 15-year moratorium will begin on uranium enrichment inside of Iran, and a cap at 3.67% enrichment will be enforced thereafter. Note that a 3.67% concentration of uranium-235 is sufficient to run nuclear power plants, but is not sufficient to construct nuclear weapons. Iran will stop operating underground nuclear facilities. Iran will pledge to never develop nuclear weapons, a completely meaningless measure in the world of international relations, if I may interject. Iran will submit to an enhanced inspection regime, almost certainly under the auspices of the International Atomic Energy Agency. This is actually meaningful because inspectors can verify that Iran is complying with the agreement. The United States will lift economic sanctions on Iran and release various Iranian funds that are currently frozen. For a one-page memo, that is a fairly detailed outline of what will happen with the rest of the negotiations. But if you will allow me to now ask a whole bunch of questions, it will become clear that a single page cannot actually constitute a real agreement. If the strait is gradually reopened, in what order are the countries ending their blockades? Which ships get the first right of passage? Can minesweepers immediately go into the strait to facilitate this? Who will be providing the minesweepers? Is Europe going to be entrapped in this process, as I have forewarned all along? Will France be the first one there, having just announced that it is moving its aircraft carrier to the Red Sea in preparation for a quick trip to Hormuz? Who will take possession of the highly enriched uranium from Iran? What will the chain of custody look like as it goes from Iran to someone else? What will happen to the uranium afterward? Will someone be buying it? Will it be downblended to 3.67% and given back to Iran for its nuclear power plants? How is Iran going to fuel its nuclear power plants otherwise? How does anyone know whether the quantity that Iran hands over is the true amount that Iran possesses? What will happen to all of the centrifuges that enrich the uranium to 60-something%? Will they be destroyed? Will they be put under 24/7 IAEA monitoring? How quickly can inspectors choose to visit a site? Who gets to dictate the decision to choose those sites? Are there any restrictions on the nationalities of the inspectors? Are there limits on where the inspectors can go? Can they only visit declared sites? What if the United States believes that Iran is using an undeclared site to secretly enrich uranium? Can the IAEA visit that site? What about other military sites? Is Iran worried that the IAEA visits across the country will reveal important non-nuclear secrets? Who in Iran will sign off on the deal? Does the United States believe that a sub-state actor will not try to undermine the agreement? What are we doing? What's going on? At some point, we will have to take a final accounting of whether any of this was worthwhile. For now, I think it is at least worth exploring the details of that question in broad strokes. Despite the Trump administration waffling on whether regime change was the point of this war, it is difficult to explain the timing of the war's onset short of that being a goal. And, at least for now, that appears to have failed. I would hesitate to make strong claims about the long-run consequences, because the Iranian government has taken significant losses, and that may play into what happens domestically over the next few years. Put differently, it is possible that we could see a regime change a year from now, which would not have happened had the United States not undertaken this war. But that is all speculation for now, and the expectation of regime change has gone down relative to the baseline expectation at the start of the war. On the nuclear front, the metrics do not look great. The time horizons floated for the deal look remarkably similar to the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action signed under the Obama administration. But there are 2 points worth noting here. 1. The JCPOA was signed more than a decade ago, and 10 to 15 years from 2026 is a longer endpoint than 10 to 15 years from 2015. And 2. So much of Iran's air defense has been destroyed that the country would need to rebuild that first as a prerequisite for protecting a nuclear program. That, in turn, has a tangible effect on Iran's compliance with the agreement. Along the Strait of Hormuz, the whole thing looks like a push, assuming the parties revert back to the status quo ex ante, as is the current suggestion. I am still seeing major news outlets discuss how the world has changed because Iran learned about the power that it has over Hormuz, which is amateur's fallacy levels of silliness. Iran always knew that it had that power over the strait. It exercised that power during this conflict, and it will continue to be able to leverage that power in the future. The last part, which receives little attention in the West but is crucial to partners in the region, is that Iran has lost the ability to project power in the region for the foreseeable future. Iran can no longer send military aid to its Axis of Resistance partners at the same levels that it has in the past decades, meaning that life will become a bit simpler for the likes of Saudi Arabia and Israel for the next few years. Now, was it worth it? That is a political question, and so your answers will vary. No doubt that the United States has paid a significant cost in terms of materiel spent on the operation. No doubt that the strait reverting back to the status quo ex ante does not undo all of the economic damage done in the meantime. No doubt that the United States has further frustrated most of its traditional allies as a result. No doubt that U.S. consumers are upset about rising gas prices. No doubt that U.S. consumers will see their frustrations continue in 6 months when we start to see the effects on higher food prices. We will have to revisit the consequences of those effects down the line in 6 or 7 years, especially as it relates to the geopolitical vulnerabilities that the United States has opened itself to. Point is, there were some costs, there were some benefits, and it is up to you to decide how much you internalize those costs relative to those benefits. So, what are our takeaway lines for today? I would be cautiously optimistic about the news from today, even if an improvement from the baseline does not improve a positive net expectation. Be careful in interpreting how much a one-page memo can govern a final settlement. And given objective information about what happened along the strait, it is still ultimately up to you to decide whether it was #worth. Meanwhile, it is also up to you to decide what you want to watch next. Perhaps a related video from this channel, or a Geopolitics helpline video from the secondary channel? And if you enjoyed today's video, then please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Take care.